the brain, these are samples of the brain study researches that have been done. And then within the brain, the basic cycling of the brain is here, brain, compared to a computer. And the function in consciousness of the brain is exactly the same of the cell phone computer that I have. And I try to explain what that function is, and here's the way it works. If you can see, would you like to hold the book?
Sure.
And then I can show that the brain, let's go to the computer first. The computer operates by having what's called an input register, or two of them in fact, and that allows you to introduce the two numbers that are going to be multiplied by one another or whatever. And in the processing unit then, the computer commands, okay, you got your two numbers, now multiply them together and shift the result of that to the output register. Now, that's all modulated by the computer's clock, which in the case of my cell phone is clocking along at 3 gigahertz or 3 billion computes a second. So the clock is just doing compute, 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 compute. And compute in the computer is compare the two input registers and output the result, which might be a logical, is A greater than B, which might be a logical plus. That's all the computer's internal programming and logic function. But the basic patterning we find in the computer goes on then in the brain. In the brain, the two input registers are the right and left lobes, where the left, we've always known, is primarily concerned with input data. That is vision, smell, taste, touch, all of these sensory apparatus, basically, smell I missed, basically goes into the left brain, where it's therefore able to be compared with right brain activity, which might be a realization of habit patterns which are stored in memory, or they might be your soul connection, which has your moral judgments, your sense of right and wrong. And without that soul, you're not a human being. So I consider the existence of this soul to be a very important part of consciousness. And also, I also in this draw the picture of God or cosmic intelligence also being in that left lobe. That's because there's a possibility that the same machinery that connects you to your soul being also connects you to your cosmic intelligence.
Cosmic intelligence, consciousness, souls. That's a long way
That's
from where you start as an
true.
astrophysicist.
That's absolutely true. And however, it seems to work throughout in this topic. That is to say, the brain can be understood as a mathematical system in which we do what's called, in this comparison, that remember when I say in a compute cycle takes the two brain lobes and then does the operation between them, and that's seen as a cross correlation mathematically. That would be a very complex mathematical operation, but the brain just does it because it's learned to. And what it does is compare your input data with your intrinsic being, your soul being, and allows you to have opinions about the left brain inputs.
Are you able to talk about this with colleagues, academic colleagues?
I haven't found the one yet. Now,
Wow.
I have talked to one or two people at the Harvard University Brain Research Department and have had very mixed results with this. In the first instance, I met somebody at a party on a boat, and I told him and explained this to him, and he said to me, "Can you think of experiments that we can do in our fMRI imager that would substantiate this and help us set up experimental protocols?" And I've not yet been able to think of how to do it, so that's on hold. Now, another response is, of course, hogwash. And I can make that more specific by telling you an anecdote that will leave everybody nameless. I have living in my building, in my apartment home, a brain researcher who's working at Harvard and is married to an MIT researcher. And I described to him this picture of consciousness and then showed him Dean Radin's paper about psychokinesis. And I said, I think that an approach to research on this is through the Dean Radin experiment, which it has so many implications. And he said, you know, that is right, that's exciting. I think we should go and repeat those experiments using our best laboratory facilities. But then I gave him the paper, and after a week, I asked him, had he read it? And he said, yes, that's very exciting. I'm talking to my dean tomorrow. But tomorrow passed, and the day after, and the day after, and he didn't respond to me and say what went down until I confronted him and said, well, how did it go with the dean? And he said, the dean told me I must do this at peril to my career. If I do this, I will have no career.
Seems like a place like Harvard, which is, you know, where your best minds are concentrated, and they're trying to understand the nature of reality, the universe around us, astrophysics, you know, what's out there, consciousness, you know, that is where people should be able to debate these things and experiment and investigate, but it's not.
You said it better than I, and put a question mark at the end of that, and there it is. Why?